Here's the biggest point that everybody's missing. It opens the door for them ultimately to have representation while they're in college. And if that happens, then ultimately we get to a point where we may start asking, why don't all the student athletes have representation? Because if you recall, that athlete at Northwestern, I forgot his name years ago, was looking to somewhere, I don't know if it was unionized. He was looking to unionize or whatever. Yep. And obviously you had the coach. Benefits. The coach spoke out. You had others speaking out, trying to knock that down. It's the last thing on earth that the NCAA wants. They don't want the student athlete to sit up there and have, representation, because if that happens, all of a sudden everything comes into play. Antitrust laws, you never know how that's going to work against you. It gets very complicated, but you know where I'm going with it. The reality is that you have a situation where it's considered a nonprofit entity for some reason. I mean, they have the nerve to consider it that, right? We know how bogus that is. Okay, it's a nonprofit entity, even though they rake in over $1 billion of March Madness alone. And then it's a separate entity from the FBS, for example, and other stuff, which is generating 9 figures in revenue. Somehow, some way, you got names on jerseys of student athletes and beyond, and everybody could go get it but the student athlete himself. You can't do that. And they talk about equal opportunity, but again, they're the ones benefiting from it. It's clearly hypocritical. We all get that. But ultimately what this comes down to is stopping the student athlete from getting representation and turning this in to the business it truly is on both sides. They don't mind it being business for them, but they want to hide behind a veneer of amateurism to get away with all the stuff that they can get away with, tax benefits and beyond. All of this stuff gets opened up the day that you acknowledge it truly is a business. That is what they are trying to stop, and they are being exposed for it. And thanks to LeBron James, thanks to Draymond Green, thanks to all of those athletes out there who have spoken out on this issue, because God knows they didn't have to, and I give them props for bringing it up.
I'm so glad we are able to disseminate between athletes being smart now, because that's all this is. This is the evolution of athletes paying attention to the business model. And I'm going to be honest with you all. 2001 to 2005, I was in college. I never one time thought about how much the NCAA was making. Never one time thought about how much we made at an LSU football game, how much you made in concession, how much those jerseys made. Not one time did I ever think about it. What the NCAA missed was the fact that the minds of these athletes were now being influenced with an influx of technology that wasn't readily available to a lot of generations before them. So all they do now is understand the business model of what the NCAA is. So to both of you all's point, here's the thing for me, though, foundationally. Like, if we want to dumb it down and make it plain for a guy like myself, the ability for you to make money off who you are should be foundational. It should be one of those situations where a kid like myself, or majority of the kids that are going to compete at high level D1, regardless of what sport, are usually coming out of situations where they have to take on some responsibility for their family's well-being. Now, whether you want to blame the parents or blame the people before them, they shouldn't have to do that. They shouldn't have to help. I had to help my mom when I was in college. And just the sheer ability to be able to do it would have been nice.
Max, I'll give you the last word, but I want to say this. The reason why I bring up the names of players and why it's so incredibly, incredibly important. LeBron James, if you think about endorsements and beyond, he's worth over $500 million. If you think about Draymond Green, you want signed for $85 million, you just signed a $100 million extension. You got cats that are getting paid, and they didn't forget. LeBron never went to college.
Never.
But he talked about, but he didn't just support Gavin Newsom signing this into law in the state of California and then just bring him on the show to shop. What he did was, when he spoke to the media, he highlighted what would have happened had he gone to college, how arenas would have been sold out, how they would have been profiting off of it. So he's showing, like you said, the acumen of this business acumen, but also their consciousness. The fact that they got paid and they didn't forget these cats on a come up is a very, very big deal.
In my daughter's school, went to the curriculum night, and one of the things they do is in one of the classes, they teach kids, which is important nowadays, how to understand when they go online. Websites with credible information and propaganda, basically. And one of the questions the kids are taught to ask themselves is, who does this information benefit? If they're trying to form my opinion, what is it? I want everyone to listen to Emmert's words very carefully. And Dan Wetzel at Yahoo Sports brought this up, I thought, very well in his column this morning. Jay Bilas tweeted a link to it this morning. When you hear things like athletes from Olympic sports will not, the money is going to dry up for them. There'll be fewer opportunities because basketball and football, right, they generate so much revenue. His point was these schools in the Pac-12, like Stanford, for example, with almost $25 billion endowment, they could easily fund those sports if they actually cared about those athletes. If they don't care about those athletes and those sports enough to fund them, why are they putting it on football and basketball players? No, let's pass that cost along to you. You fund them, because if you don't, we're certainly not going to. And then blaming those kids for the other kids not getting opportunities, it's slimy. It's fundamentally dishonest. And if it's not dishonest, they're telling on themselves.
You could talk about that, and you're absolutely right. It is slimy, but there's another reason why it's slimy. What makes up the vast majority of the rosters in college football and basketball?
African Americans.
African Americans. So you're willing to take from those that you label as disenfranchised and have to scratch and claw on the come up. You're willing to take from them.
But Max, what they learned, to you and Stephen A's point, is that doesn't quiet the noise anymore. See, that response that you just gave, what the NCAA was giving for a long time, it would quiet the response. Yep. Well, how are we going to do it? Who's it going to affect? That doesn't work anymore.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.